All right, good evening, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. And I see that everyone's in attendance. Councillor Millett's absent. Councillor Chatton is the alternate tonight. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Okay, seeing none. I just got some opening remarks. The planning meeting is being heard by the City Council Planning Advisory Committee, and public notice has been given in accordance with the Planning Act. The non-elected members of the Planning Advisory Committee are Mr. John Beltudis, Mr. Tyler Fenton, Mr. Paul Jennings, and Ms. Sarita Van Dyke. Citizen appointees may ask questions and participate in the discussion in order to assist in making recommendations to City Council, but may not make motions or vote in connection with the public meeting. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Planning Committee or City Council before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of City Council or the Ontario Land Tribunal. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Belleville before the related bylaw is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless in the opinion of the tribunal there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party. Comments received at this public meeting as well as written comments will be considered by the Engineering Development Services Department in analysis of the applications that were part of the public meeting tonight. For further information on how to provide comments to the City regarding an application from this public meeting, please email planning@belleville.ca. A recommendation report will be brought forward upon receipt of all agency and public comments in the future. Any person wishing to be advised of the Belleville Planning Advisory Committee's recommendations with respect to today's applications are requested to leave their name and address on the appropriate notification sheet located on the clipboard beside the podium. And we'll move on to the public meeting portion. 3.1, Notice of Complete Application and Introductory Public Meeting for Proposed Amendment to Zoning to Belleville Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw 10-245, 221 Bell Boulevard, City of Belleville. Owner is Choice Properties Limited Partnership. Agent is Wellings of Belleville Incorporated, and file numbers are B-77-1185 and B-50-3-42. If staff could present the application, please.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. The city received an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications for the property located on the southeast corner of Bell Boulevard and Sydney Street. The application proposed a 4-story apartment building with 74 units and accessory units on the ground floor that will be oriented towards Bell Boulevard, including a health club, bar, and restaurant, as well as 89 townhouse dwellings south of the apartment building for a total of 163 dwelling units. The rezoning application requests to rezone a portion of the subject land from Highway Commercial C345 zone to Residential 6 Density R6X zone with special provisions. These special provisions include permitting townhouse dwellings and respective relief for both apartment and townhouse dwellings. The property is designated commercial land use in the official plan and is included within the additional intensification areas in the updated official plan. The official plan amendment application requests to change a portion of the designation to residential land use. No changes to the land use designation or zoning have been proposed for the northeast corner of the subject land. Staff have not received any correspondence from the public regarding this application at this time. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? If you come forward, provide your name, and if you could activate the microphone, the floor is yours.
I am the planner for Nautical Lands Group. We are the developer of the site, and we're working with Choice to develop the site for seniors residential community. We have a PowerPoint presentation that I'm hoping we can get loaded. It's just a brief presentation just to give a little bit of insight of who we are. No, that's not it. There we go.
So just press the arrow buttons.
Okay. So our communities, sorry, I should introduce myself. My name is Angela Mariani, and I'm the planner for Nautical Lands Group, and this is Peter Gregor. He is the VP of Development for Nautical Lands Group. Our communities are for 55 plus seniors, and the whole community is rental. We have townhouses and apartments. We call it the Wellings because it's live well, and it's a community that allows independent seniors to continue living in their own community without, in a rental community with like-minded people, and allow for them to continue to thrive in the community and stay and age in place in their community. That's a little bit of our Wellings. Andrew's already talked about our proposal. We have a couple of amendments for the official plan, as well as some zoning bylaw amendments to, but we are retaining a portion of the site as commercial at the northeast corner, closest to the No Frills store. The existing site is currently vacant and has been vacant for since at least 2013. The site will remain under the same ownership as the commercial plaza, and we're looking to construct 74 apartment units and 89 townhouse units. That will consist of bungalows and townhouses. All are independent living with full kitchens, laundry. The apartments will have balconies as well. There's amenity space in the apartment building, which would include a restaurant, a bar, and a health club for the community. That's the site, and that's the northeast corner that's going to remain commercial. That's our site plan. So the apartment will be fronting Belleville Boulevard. We're proposing a pickleball court at Sydney, and townhouse units in behind the apartment. That's an elevation of our apartment. This is some of the designs from our other suites in other communities. And that's our bar, our amenity area, fitness center. That's the outdoor patio. And these are the bungalow units. There's blocks of 4 and 5, and that's the interior, how they will look. And we're hoping to provide affordable and desirable, well-appointed seniors, independent living rental apartments and townhouse units. It fills a need for this type of development in Belleville, and it provides living options for independent seniors, allowing them to remain in their community and age in place, ideally located with proposed access to the grocery store, retail, restaurants, and there's a future walking path that's proposed in behind us to connect through the community. That's our end of our little PowerPoint. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer.
Thank you. Any questions from committee members? No? I just have one that I ask everybody that comes forward with an application. So upon approval, if everything goes well, what's your timeline for construction?
As soon as possible.
And how long do you think the build-out would take?
I think the apartment building is about 18...
It's about 15 months for the apartment building, so we're hoping to, once we get through the planning stages, depending on when we hit winter weather, that can add a month or two. And then the townhomes, each block takes about 5 to 6 months, and we overlap them every couple of weeks. So it's technically just over a year for the apartment building, and probably another year to get most of the townhomes up.
And we'll start with the apartment, that's phase 1, and then move into the townhouses.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jennings, you saw your hand?
Thank you. Through the chair, I had a couple of questions about, it seems like there's enough parking to make the building twice as tall. I was wondering why you're limiting it to 4 stories, first of all. And then secondly, I had a question regarding the access from Sydney Street. There's 3 different plans that show 3 different entrances. I was just wondering which of those, I would be concerned if you had the in and out entrance close to the intersection at Bell Boulevard.
We've already been working with town staff on that access. So one of them is closed we only have one access onto Sydney, and it's the one that's furthest away from the intersection, so the southern portion. And then we have one access through, it's gonna be joint with the plaza, and that will come off onto Bell Boulevard.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, so the planning justification report says 2 onto Sydney. It's down to 1 now?
It's down to one because I think the one closest to the intersection was, it said that it wouldn't
Okay, good.
work for us.
And then any comment on the size? Why it's not bigger, I guess?
I can comment on that if you'd like. So we built this type of housing across Canada, and we've been doing this for a while. So we have certain models that work well when we go into communities. The parking is actually worked out exactly for the 74 units that we have. So it seems like we might have extra parking, but we're trying to attract able-bodied and active seniors. So most of them still want to bring a car. We are finding, I think our statistics are about 75 to 80% of our actual clientele have a car. Sometimes it's more when they move in, and we found quite often after they've lived with us for a while and they realize they're close to the grocery store and close to the restaurant, they say like, why am I paying insurance and paying for a car? But our average is 75 to 80%. So you take that and then you do our staffing, because we have a bar and restaurant, so there's a staff contingency part and then visitors. So the 74 units is a model that works well when it's accompanied with the townhomes that we have around it. And the parking is actually a pretty accurate number that we work out. So if we tried to go higher, we'd have to double the number of parking spaces, and then we get into losing sight.
Okay, I see some other questions. I would just ask if you could pivot the microphone to when you speak.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. We can hear you in the room, but I know there are people watching online, and these microphones aren't great unless you're right on top of it.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, no
sorry.
problem. Councillor Chatton.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I'm just wondering, you had mentioned that you planned on your phase 1 being the apartment building rather than the faster 6 to 8 month builds of the townhomes. Can you just give me some reasoning for that? It would be nice to see some availability for housing sooner rather than later.
I can speak
yeah,
to
go
that
ahead.
if you like. The apartment building is more complex to build. There's a lot more staging required. So we usually build that first because the general contractor and the trades need more space. And then once we start building houses, you can make those in smaller lots. So chances are what we would probably end up coming forward with is that once it's under construction, the apartment building, like halfway through construction, we'd start building townhomes. That's what we'd like to do. I just don't like to promise that now. And then the general contractors are saying, I need all this space to spread out. And we do plan, the other side of it, just to let you know, which is kind of unique, we have a modular plant that builds all of our wall panels. So part of our process is we try to make it as cost effective and efficient as possible. So we used to, for years, we've been having others build our wall panels. Now we've built our own factory. So both the apartment building and the townhomes all have modular walls will come in by truck, and they stand them all up like a Lego set. And so if all goes well and we can track it properly, we'll get the main building up, and then once it's up and they're finishing it, we'd start putting up houses.
And I think on the other side as well, the apartment has all the amenity spaces, so we like to have that in place for our when people start moving in. So the restaurant and the bar is all set up, and
Part of our townhome communities, we call them clubhouses, that they have a social center to get it together in. So in this instance, instead of building a separate building as a clubhouse, we're building the apartment building, and it already has all these amenities. So we say if you move into the townhome, you can go in there and use the restaurant, but there's also fitness and different things like that. So.
Okay. Councillor Enright Miller.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just want to thank you for your presentation. I think it's certainly needed in our city. The more housing, the better, as we all know, it's a shortage. The plan is beautiful. You've obviously done a lot of studies and whatnot. What do you think your time is to actually rent the 100% occupancy? Do you have a gauge on that?
I
And
think
price point, have you talked about that yet?
so we try to start all of our developments at $19.95 a month. And that all depends on the size of the unit, of course, and then that would be the size of the unit, whether it's in the building or whether it's in a townhouse. But we try to start affordable at $19.95, which we think is a good rate with all our studies and all our communities that we've built throughout Southern Ontario. We want to build out as quickly as possible. So we're gonna start once we get the approvals to go ahead. We'll start marketing the site. and we'll decide if it goes really well, then we'll just continue to build. Yeah.
So your timing, typically we find by the time we finish construction, like say that apartment building, that's gonna take 14, 15 months. We're leasing throughout that time period, and usually by the time we open, more than 50% of the building is pre-leased, is what we're typically finding. So it depends on each community, but I anticipate from our market studies here, there is a large number of seniors, 55 plus, that typically would be looking for some form of housing, and we find we're much more appealing than most of the other retirement offerings. So I wouldn't be surprised. There's some communities we've gone into, and within the first year, it's totally full. So,
And waiting lists on some of our communities, so, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from community members? No. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? And a third time, anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? And I will ask a third time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Okay, seeing none, got a resolution of the Choice Properties Limited Partnership Application B-77-1185, B-50-3-42 be referred to the regular Planning Advisory Committee meeting for consideration. Moved by Councillor Alsop, seconded by Councillor Enright Miller. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 3.2, Notice of Complete Application and Introductory Public Meeting for Proposed Amendment to Zoning Bylaw 10-245 as amended, 317 Front Street, City of Belleville. Owner is Ali Omar. Agent is EcoVue Consulting Services Incorporated. And the file number is B-77-1186. And I'll have staff do a presentation as they're multitasking here.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Computer might be out of commission, but we'll proceed forward.
Sure.
The property is located on the east side of Front Street, north of Victoria Avenue, and west of Pinnacle Street, and is currently developed with a 3-story mixed-use building, including a commercial space on the ground floor, 10 dwelling units above the ground floor, and 5 existing parking spaces. The application proposes a 3-story addition to the rear of the building with 2 units on each floor for a total of 6 additional dwelling units. The application requests to rezone from general commercial C2-3 zone to general commercial C2X zone with special provisions to permit 2 dwelling units on the ground floor, to reduce the size of 1-bedroom units to 35 square meters, and to reduce the required number of parking spaces. The official plan designation of the property is City Center. Staff received 1 submission from a member of the public in opposition of the application. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? I see the microphone's already activated, so you state your name.
Hello, here, we'll do this. Hello, my name is Beverly Saunders. I work for EcoVue Consulting. I'm the agent for the landowner, Ali Omar. I had a presentation, but I think the computer is out of commission, so I'll just go on the fly. So this is a mixed-use development, or mixed-use building. It has residential and commercial units, as was stated by staff. There are actually 12 units in the current building, but we are proposing 6 additional units. The zoning bylaw amendment that we're proposing is for relief for parking, relief for the size requirements of units. Typically, bylaws had those size requirements in the past. But now building code allows us to have slightly smaller units, and that enables us to provide units that are a bit more affordable for people who would like those types of units. And then additionally, we require the amendment for the units at grade. So that's the part I'd like to focus on very quickly. So there is naturally some policies within the official plan specific to at-grade units, typically wanting to keep commercial units at street level for residents and people in downtown to use. So I just want to clarify that those will be maintained. The units will be proposed at the back of the building. So there's an addition currently that sort of includes some HVAC stuff and And so that would actually be replaced, and then we'd be adding 2 stories above, and then there'd be 6 units. So essentially, it's a 3-story building now, and then on the back, you'd be adding 3 more stories, 2 units for each story. So that's approximately the case. I had the site plan and some pictures and the drawings for you to see, but for now, we'll just leave it here, and then I'll answer any questions that you might have. In terms of the parking, currently, there's about 5 parking spots on the site. We're not proposing any additional parking. We have asked for relief from that, given amount of public transit that's nearby, the amount of parking lots that are nearby, and the fact that these are rental units that are relatively small, and so that it lends itself to being affordable, which means typically people don't necessarily need to have a vehicle if there's access to public transit or public parking. There has been some discussions with staff about having cash in lieu for parking, as is permitted under the official plan. If that's the case, we would like to have that rate be as low as possible. We're trying to keep this project as affordable as possible to move forward as quickly as possible. So we did provide some recommendations as to why we thought 0 parking spots was justifiable. But if a lower ratio, say 0.5 to 1 unit, or 0.75 to 1 unit would be considered. If cash in lieu is required, we would request that as well. I'm here to answer any questions, and the landowner is also here in case you have specific questions for him. I did try to get some of those answers for you, though, about construction times and things like that, so I can answer that. But I'll pull them up if there's something I don't know the answer to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And we do have the planning justification report in the agenda as well, and I know committee members have reviewed that. So any
Perfect.
questions? Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Absolutely.
I've spent a great deal of time in the downtown core over the course of the last 8 years, and very familiar with the location itself. I have a concern about the exception as it relates to the parking.
Okay.
Only because there is no overnight parking in any of the public lots that surround downtown. And I know that that has been a very contentious issue with the building owners and the residents that live down here, as the absence of parking. So I'd like to understand, with 18 dwelling units, how the building owner expects these going to be able to survive with only 5 parking spaces.
I can speak generally, and then I can bring the landowner up to speak to that as well. Typically, when we use rental units, because these are specifically intended to be rental, there's an opportunity to manage client expectations or people that are renting those units, so they don't come with parking. And so then people plan accordingly. And I say that personally because I purchased a home that didn't have parking, and I don't have a vehicle. So it's something that I'm personally aware of, and I think that's how they manage expectations, is that you sort of know what you're getting into when you go to rent. Typically in downtown areas, there isn't the opportunity to add additional parking because the lots are small. You've got residential units on top, but you want to encourage having mixed use and people living in the downtown and using the transit. And so typically, we still recommend allowing intensification in downtown areas, even if you aren't necessarily able to provide on-site parking. And then the cash in lieu option is another option to give the municipality some resources in order to provide additional parking or provide overnight parking if that's something that you're interested in. But typically what we recommend is just managing the renter's expectations and knowing what they are renting when they purchase it, and then that their prices get adjusted accordingly. Yeah. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Ali.
Good afternoon. Yes, with regards to the parking issues, like I can speak for the existing 12 units right now. I have 5 parking spots, and I'm only using 3. I have 8 units rented to like students. I have 3 1-bedrooms and 9 bachelors. So majority of my tenants don't require parking. They work, they take public transportations. I have students, international students, and like I said, I don't see parking would be an issue there. It's not like gonna be developing or constructing 2-bedroom units or 3-bedroom units, so they're just fairly small size units for like a couple or like one person, like a working professional. I think parking is not a major issue for this property being downtown. So.
Thank you. And if I meant a follow-on question, and invite you either or both, have there been discussions with the neighbors on either side? The Empire is on one side of your building, and a front gallery is on the opposite side. I'm just curious whether or not you've had any conversations with your neighbors about your plans.
Yes, I spoke with with front gallery on a couple of occasions, so no issues there. On the other side, I never met them. I know the couple of realtors in the Royal LePage, there. I think that they know about my plan, and I purchased the property through them, so I don't think there's any objections there.
I will speak to the fact that I know the neighbor did send in an objection to the application, so I can speak very briefly to those comments. The comments were primarily about adding rental units to the downtown and whether that was appropriate or not, particularly in the absence of parking, but also just the speculation on the clientele that would frequent a small 1-bedroom apartment. I always take a bit of issue with those kinds of comments because the intensification policies of a downtown area is intended to have a wide range of residents, and these 1-bedroom units are needed in a housing portfolio throughout the downtown. And downtown is literally where you need to accommodate those kinds of things because it is where access to services exist, where access to public transit exists. And so while I certainly understand, the knee-jerk reaction to feel that way when a small unit is getting built nearby, I think these types of units are needed in the housing spectrum, and this is, in particular, the type of site that would need to accommodate them. So that's all I can really speak to that in general. I did read the remainder of the comments, but most of them were related to that. I did note that she said that the clientele, since he took over the property, were improved, and so hopefully that speaks a little bit to the clientele that he had provided since he took over.
So she was concerned the previous landlord was an absentee landlord. He was just a working professional downtown Toronto, and he had just one of the tenants managing the property, so anybody can just rent in that building, where I do have I do pre-screen very well, like before I put any tenant there. So she was kind of concerned about the previous landlords. And the last 12 months, I've overturned 8 tenants, out of the 12. So majority of the tenants now, they're headache-free. So.
And to answer the question about timelines as well, so the idea is to start as soon as possible, and then construction timelines would be within a year. So
Okay, thank
to
you.
preemptively answer that question.
Okay, Councillor Alsop.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you for your presentation today.
Absolutely.
And a lot of conversation in the presentation about affordability, the fact that the units were smaller for that reason, the fact that the parking wasn't there for that reason, and that perhaps if we were looking for cash in lieu, to try to diminish that so that we could keep the units affordable. What price point will they be rented at?
I don't know that that's been determined. So I know that there's been discussions of this zoning, and then he's getting quotes out for the construction so that he can move that along. I assume it'll be an at-market rate for a smaller unit with no parking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like around $1,400. These would be like modern, units, like one bedroom units. So right now, like I said, between $1,200 to $1,400. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chatton.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I just looked it up quickly because I was interested to know, I'm very interested in the history of the downtown core, and some of the buildings that exist there have a lot of historical significance. So I just wondered, this used to be called the Crystal Hotel. way, way, way back. And is there any conflict at all with the Historical Society of Belleville? Have you checked in with them about what you're able to do? And are they on board with this as well?
Yeah, so sorry, I should have mentioned, it is a heritage building. That was in the presentation, but it slipped my mind, so my apologies. So the facade of the building and the front of the building is untouched, and so that will remain. It's our understanding the property's listed but not designated, and so the issues come in if you're going to demolish the building, but less so if you're going to do interior designs or building on the back. We did look at the addition on the back, so that's not a heritage part of the building, and so we're going to be building up in that component. But yes, we did consult on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Any other questions of committee members? No? Okay, thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
presentation.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? And anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? And finally, a third time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Seeing none, I've got a resolution that the Ali Omar application B-77-1186 be referred to the regular Planning Advisory Committee meeting for consideration. Councillor Chatton, seconded by Councillor Enright Miller. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 3.3, Notice of Complete Application and Introductory Public Meeting for Proposed Amendment to Zoning Bylaw 3014, Southwest corner of Millennium Parkway and Highway 62, City of Belleville. Owner is 1499926 Ontario Incorporated and Fry Leasing Incorporated. Agent is Jewel Engineering Incorporated, and the file number is B-77-1187. If staff could present the application, please.
Certainly, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
The property is located on the southwest corner of Millennium Parkway and Highway 62, which was previously rezoned to prevent a casino, subject to a holding symbol. Consent applications B37 and B3822 facilitated a lot line adjustment to allow both properties to have frontage on Millennium Parkway. As conditions of consent, the application proposes to rezone the property from Highway Commercial C19-H zone to Highway Commercial C1H zone with a holding symbol to require a traffic impact study. The official plan designation of the property is commercial land use. Staff have not received any correspondence from the public regarding this application at this time. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application? Yeah, if you could just come forward, state your name, and activate the microphone. The floor is yours.
Hi, it's Brian Keane with Jewel Engineering, and Andrew did a good job of explaining the proposal, but simply a rezoning as a condition of severance, and it's really to go back to the parent zone C1, which is the highway commercial, and the project would be for a future car lot. There would be two parcels, and that's subject to the severance, of course, but the parcels both would be serving the car industry.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from committee members? No? Thanks again. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? And anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Anyone wanting to speak in opposition of the application? And finally, a third time, anyone wanting to speak in opposition of the application? Seeing none? Thank you. I have a resolution on 3.3 that the 1499926 Ontario Incorporated Fry Leasing Incorporated application B-77-1187 be referred to the regular Planning Advisory Committee meeting for consideration. Moved by Councillor Chatton, seconded by Councillor Enright Miller. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So before I go on, back to 3.2, I know we have a resolution to refer it. A member of the public has wanted to be here to speak to it. I'm going to allow that opportunity with the consent of committee. Is everybody okay with it? Yeah. Okay, thank you. If you just want to activate your microphone, state your name, and then you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Diane Bartlett. I am the owner of Upfront Gallery at 313 Front Street. I wanted to speak in opposition to this zoning amendment application. I was actually watching on YouTube, and I did hear Mr. Omar state that he had spoken with me about this matter and that I was okay with it, and I just wanted to let the council know that that is not the case. I met Mr. Omar when he purchased the building, I think 2 years ago, but I don't think we've spoken since then. I am out of breath, sorry, I apologize.
No, that's okay.
I did send in an email today, and I don't know if that got around to anyone.
It was circulated to committee.
Okay.
Yep, and
So,
it's on
so you
record.
understand my objection to this. Parking is an issue at that rear of those buildings. We have many problems with people blocking the laneways. And recently, some work has been done at 311 Front Street, and it's constant with construction workers and service people accessing that laneway, many times blocking that laneway. We're unable to get out of our driveway. My building is also a 3-story building with commercial on the ground floor. I operate my business out of that. There are 4 street parking spaces, and when the construction people are there, they're often used up, so there's no parking for my business. I can't see this getting any better with the addition of 6 more units. I know that Mr. Omar believes that everyone will have use of public transit, but his parking lot is full. 6 more units is 6 more potential people, and yes, they manage expectations. However, people move in and out, people party, people come home at 2 in the morning, people trespass, people leave garbage. I'm not saying that those new tenants will do that, but this has been our experience. My daughter and I live on the 2nd floor. My building has residential space on the 2nd and the 3rd floor. 3rd floor right now is not used, and the 2nd floor is just our apartment. I would like to see, as I have seen, more development of the upstairs of the commercial buildings downtown, because yes, we need more people downtown. But I think what we don't need is more closet space for people to live in, and I've been in that building, and they're very small. They need a lot of work. I'm hoping that that's part of what he's planning to do, is to upgrade those suites, and maybe he has been. I haven't been in there in a few years. But I don't think it's in keeping with what we've been trying to do in the downtown. All of us have been there for years trying to make it better. And this is for all of us, not just for one building owner. There's a lot of development going on down the street with beautiful apartments being put in existing space, not adding to it. So constructing in the rear of a very cramped area with little or no parking, I think is going to be a nightmare for the amount of time that the construction lasts. And going forward, I think 5 parking spaces for 18 units is ridiculous. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, any questions of committee members? No? Okay, thank you very much. And thank you, committee members, for allowing that. Public meeting's important that everybody has an opportunity to speak. 3.4, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw 10-245, 40 Wilson Avenue, City of Belleville. Owner is RIC Midland Land Incorporated, and the agent is Innovative Planning Solutions. The file number is B-77-1188, and I'll have staff present the application. I know we're doing some technical rejigging here, so. We're real close. No problem. These things happen. Okay.
The property is located generally on the east side of Palmer Road, north of Boyce Court, and south of Moira Street West. The application proposes to rezone the property from general industrial M2 zone and urban holding UH zone to residential fourth density R4H zone with a holding symbol and residential fifth density R5H zone with a holding symbol and open space O1 zone. This would facilitate the development of 82 single detached dwellings and 71 townhouse dwellings for a total of 153 dwelling units. The proposed holding symbol would require the completion of a sanitary sewer servicing study to determine the capacity of the existing sanitary sewer delivery system, identify options for delivery of sewage from this area to the sewage treatment plant, and to assess the sewage treatment plant's capacity to process expected overflows to satisfy Section 310.4 of the City of Belleville's official plan. The official plan designation of this property is residential land use. Staff have not received any correspondence from the public regarding this application at this time. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? Please come forward, activate the microphone, and the floor is yours. I'll just get you to activate the microphone. There you go.
That would be the talk button. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No, I'm just a counselor. That's fine.
I see.
Thank you.
Well, I should introduce myself then. I'm Kevin Bichard. I'm a planner with IPS Consulting Inc., and we're representing RIC Midland Inc., who, as was mentioned, is the owner of the property. If you need our address, I'm not sure if you're okay. Okay, we'll carry on then. I'm going to just take a moment and try and figure out your computer here. There we go. So the lenses I've mentioned, I'm bringing up a slide here that are owned by RIC Midland, and there really are two properties. The westerly property is the subject of today's application, but I want to make it clear that there is an easterly property as well that is following along in the regulatory review and approval process. And the residential property is 7.78 hectares, and it's on the left-hand side or the west side, fronting Palmer Avenue. It has 310 meters frontage along Palmer Avenue and 50 meters along the existing throughway of Wilson Avenue. And I'll come back to that in a minute or two. The westerly portion are lands that are under review now in the minister's review of the proposed official plan that was approved by the city. And we have asked that the lands be redesignated from industrial to residential in the new official plan. And our hope and intent is that both parcels will proceed ultimately through to residential development in this area. So these are two properties that have been, they're infill properties obviously, and I expect you very well know these sites. They have quite a history, and so it's our client's intent to bring them forward and reposition them for residential development in this community. I'm still figuring out your computer. I'm going to show you two slides. One is sort of the broader surrounding area, and then I'm going to focus in just a little bit. And obviously, the area that we're talking about now is the residential area, and it's outlined in red on this plan. And you can see that it's an infill development area. You know well that there are industrial lands in the vicinity, a school, the fairgrounds are further to the south and west, and the property is really hemmed by residential development. So the intent in the bigger picture is to see the conversions of these lands from really the former commercial and industrial uses to the residential uses going forward. That's the sum and substance of what we're trying to do. I'm focusing now, this is the second slide I wanted to show you, because what it's telling you is there's a history of intensification, a history of conversion already for these lands, or the area around these lands. So immediately north in 2019, there was an approved development for 39 residential units. To the south, there's consideration for redesignation of these lands for residential use. You have the fairgrounds further to the south and to the west, and an opportunity there for intensification in residential and other uses on the property, as well as redevelopment further to the west there. And I mentioned the industrial lands that are part of our clients' land holdings, but not subject to the application, and they're, of course, being considered for residential use in the future. So this area is transitioning to residential use from former industrial and commercial uses. This is a quick map to show you the existing official plan and zoning on the property, and as was mentioned a little bit earlier in the preamble, the lands are in the official plan as residential lands. And what this is telling you is that there's alignment between the current policy in your official plan for these particular properties, or this particular portion of the property, and the proposed use for residential use. The drawing on the right is showing the zoning bylaws that exist today, urban holding and general industrial, which of course we've made application for rezoning of these lands to bring them into alignment with the residential designation in the official plan. The policy context, and I think sometimes it's a little lofty to talk about provincial policy, because it kind of gets lost in the discussion, but I like to mention it because it is prevailing in what I do in my living. And essentially we're looking at infill development, but we're also, as planners, being asked to, and I've heard a number of presentations that spoke to this tonight, to bring forward compact built forms, maximizing the use of existing infrastructure and resources in the community. And this is where this development is coming forward and implementing provincial policy. The proposed rezoning is certainly going to support that on lands that are currently designated for residential use. And looking further down the road, the redesignation of the industrial lands will follow along in that similar pattern. I'm going to skip forward just a little bit because I'll go into the detail here. Oh, one more slide, I'm apologizing. When I look then at provincial policy, I want to see how it aligns with local land use policy. And of course, you've gone through alignment exercises in the city of Belleville to ensure that you comply with the provincial policy. And indeed, the local official plan is promoting different dwelling types and increasing densities and providing for a range of housing types. And all of these elements are represented in this particular plan. Your local plan will also want to see transit-supported development, and this development is on a transit route. It'll also want to see more efficient use of infrastructure and servicing in the area as well. And again, this development will deliver on that particular aspect. We already heard too in the preamble that there's a discussion about and a requirement for extension of services through this area to facilitate not only our lands but also the fairground lands as well. So part of our involvement in discussions, continuing discussions with staff, is going to be factoring in, figuring out what services, how they're going to be extended, and how we can participate in that as a landowner to begin to put these services in place and help provide for the development and extension of this area. So we see that as something that is an evolving discussion in this plan and development as we go forward. So not all the answers are here yet, at least on our side, and we're going to be working with your staff to figure that out as we go forward. And to ensure that nothing sort of escapes from that discussion, these lands would be subject to a holding provision in the bylaw. And again, these services would have to be identified and a path established for their establishment before we could be released by those holding provisions. And I'm sure the council is aware that these holding provisions would come back for your consideration before they're lifted. So it really is understanding that there's an intent here in provincial and municipal policy for these lands to be converted. There's a servicing issue that we need to tackle before we can bring these lands forward for development. And that's the goal and objective that we have in bringing these lands forward. So the site plan, I'm going to show you two plans. First, showing the combined properties of the residential and industrial property. And again, the one on the left is the residential development, and it's showing a draft plan of subdivision that has townhouse lots, single detached lots, park, stormwater management block, which is a very typical kind of development in subdivision development I'm sure you've seen many times before. The right-hand side shows the extension of an open space park onto the lands that are currently designated industrial, and a, let's say, ghosted out plan for further residential development, and perhaps more intensive residential development going from west to east. And of course, on the west side of this plan, we have a residential area west of Palmer, and on the east side, we have, I'm sorry, I've got that. Let me get my west and east straightened around here. No, I did have it correct. On the west side, we have the residential in Palmer. On the east side, we have industrial. So we're trying to, in that context, match, you know, the uses as we transition them. So I'll use that as my lead into the next slide, which is really our development concept. And I want you to envision that on the other side of Palmer Road, we have single-family residential lots. And what we have right at Palmer Road and backlotting onto Palmer are single-family residential lots on our side of the development. And as we transition westerly, you can see the blocks on the plan. And those blocks would be divided through part lot control in a subsequent application to provide for street townhouses. So they would be individually owned, and they're more affordable street houses or housing as part of this plan. There's a small contribution to a park which would be aligned with the neighboring property, as I showed a little bit earlier, and that's in the north and the east portion of the plan, and in the south and west portion of the plan we have a stormwater management block. So again, this plan is transitioning densities. Overall, we have a density of about 30 units per hectare, which is pretty reasonable. It's more intensive than historic development, but it's not so intensive that it's you know, a very aggressive development density in this particular plan. And again, what we're doing is transitioning here from left to right. So I've talked about transitioning. I've talked about the park. The other piece that I want to mention is the extension of Wilson Avenue. And of course, it would be completing Wilson Avenue through to Palmer in that particular alignment. This is a bit of a confusing map, but the best way to dissect it is this. There are two zones, or three zones, that are being brought forward for consideration. In the bottom left-hand corner where you see the cross hatching, that's essentially a townhouse designation. It's an R5 designation. The balance of the plan with the striped and the zigzag is R4 designation. And your R4 designation allows up to 14 meters or 45-foot lots. So that's sort of, you know, a typical, by today's standards, it would be an oversized single-family lot, but essentially it's a single-family lot. And then we have open space, as I've mentioned, in the upper right-hand corner of the lot as well. So I'm on my last slide. Essentially, we have a zoning bylaw amendment here that's intended to facilitate the redevelopment of approximately 7.3 hectares of land on the residential component. We're moving it from an urban holding and general industrial designation to residential density 4, which is your single-family residential 14-meter frontage lot, and a townhouse designation to provide for street fronting townhouses on the development. It's an opportunity to provide for a redevelopment of a property that you know, is is really positioned to make that happen. We're recognizing, of course, that servicing is an issue that needs to be resolved, and that's something we're working with your staff on. We believe that solutions will come forward that will make this, that will provide for the redevelopment of this property within a reasonable time frame, and allow for this revitalization of this area, and continued, I should say, revitalization of this area in terms of recognizing that council is already committed to past approvals, which would start that process. So that's my presentation for this evening. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, Councillor Chatton?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I have a few questions, but first I wanted to say, like, the 153 unit development supply increase inspires hope. I think that that's an incredibly awesome goal to have. This particular area, I know that, and I'll be the first to admit, I don't know much about planning rules and the confines or parameters that you have to work within, but in this particular area, an adjacent neighbor to what you're proposing is a crematorium that's rather large. Is there any constraints or restrictions for being able to build what you're proposing in such close proximity to a cremation facility?
Right. So I've actually permitted crematoriums in the past, and so I can speak generally to what that means. And it's really more of a point source control on the crematorium. So what happens is that they can't emit, contaminants that would present a health risk to residents in this area. Not only ourselves, but in this development, but obviously there are residents in that area currently. So it really is, an MOECP regulatory control on emissions. And I know that sounds awfully technical for such a sensitive subject, but that's how that's designed. So they have to meet their criteria at their property line. So the assumption and the understanding is from our end that's being done. And we have to rely on the MOECP to provide for that kind of regulation. And they're governed by something called an ECA, which is an Environmental Certificate of Approval, that we can all take a look at if we like to. I think you should be able to search it online. If not, we could go to the ministry and pull that out.
Sure, thank you, that's wonderful. Supplementary to that, you were talking about access from Palmer. I just wanted to be clear, you do intend to have road access from Palmer Road and Sydney Street? Is that correct?
Here, let me see if I can. I think you pulled my presentation, or it's no longer up on the screen. So yeah, we intend to have access. So all of the lots are going to be backlotted onto Palmer. So we're not talking about having driveways onto Palmer Avenue. So that would be, and that's fairly consistent with what's there. There are a couple of houses that front lot onto Palmer in that location, but generally they're on the internal streets. So the access would be through, and these are all municipal rights of way, they're throughout, so it would be fairly typical on that line. I think that answered your question.
Yes, it does, thank you. And my last question is just surrounding what you mean by affordable. What is your definition of affordable regarding the townhomes that you had mentioned in your presentation?
Yeah, well, that's always a question, isn't it? Because two things that keep me at bay is I can't commit to a price for, and I don't know that one's been set, and so I can't reasonably represent to you as council that this is going to be at a certain price point in the community. I know that my client is doing his own investigation and seeing what is the range of pricing in this community that is going to be marketable. The best thing that we can do in terms of committing to an affordable housing style is really to commit to a housing type that is going to be more affordable just by its nature. And that's where the road towns come in. The challenge here is that we're trading off transition and between the existing residential development area in terms of size and scope, scale, and then moving into providing a range of housing in this plan. But and one of the reasons that I wanted to bring forward both plans is to demonstrate, and I can't get back onto your schedule, but if I can rely on your memory, is as we moved to the east, you saw larger blocks in the industrial, and so that's going to give us an opportunity to bring in other kinds of built forms. So maybe an apartment or maybe stacked townhouses or something that's a little variable without upsetting the transition, if you will. So that's where our thinking is right now. Now, this is a plan, of course, that's in front of this discussion. Really, we're at the discussion stage in terms of this committee and council and with staff. So there may be other ideas that come forward. And I'm not going to suggest this is the final plan, but this is where we're starting in this discussion with this committee and staff.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Okay, Mr. Baltutis.
Thank you, through the chair. Can you speak to the health of the land? Has it got a clean bill of health based on the historical industries that were around it? And if it doesn't, then obviously there's some work to be done. And my second question would be to parking, in that if we move forward and you build this great subdivision, what's the parking going to be like for each of these units? So I guess the
well, let's start with the first, and I don't have, I'm not familiar with the environmental, the phase 2 environment. So there's been in phase 1 environmental work, and it's recommending that additional phase 2 work be done. So that's the component. But I can speak to the process because I've been through that many times. And what we're talking about in this site is a transition in land use from commercial and industrial land uses to residential. And where that happens in Ontario, there's a requirement for the site to be verified in terms of it being, first of all, whether it has contaminants, and if contaminants are found on site, that they be removed or mitigated before development can occur. So the final approval of the site in terms of zoning cannot happen until the site is certified that it's completely clean. So, and in terms of the past uses, it looks like there was concrete, manufacturing on the site, and that has certain elements of contamination. And there may have been others associated with the formal industrial use. But I'm not well enough versed to tell you what they are, but I am well enough versed to tell you that they are going to be addressed, and they're in the process of being addressed as we go forward. And part of our ability to do that is always, obviously, understanding that the application is going forward. And so it's pouring more effort, pouring more resources into the file and into the project to bring it to fruition. And so this is what's happening now, I think, in moving this forward with the official plan amendment being brought forward, certainly on the industrial and these lands being brought forward, and servicing strategies being figured out. It all brings this next stage of moving it into the development phase, into reality. So parking. I'm not seeing that there is a parking issue on this site, but it'll be single-family housing, so you'll have your very typical one in the garage, one in the driveway, and similarly with the townhouses as well. So I don't anticipate that there'll be any kind of parking issue. And of course, and I'm at the risk of you guys throwing your pens at me, there will be street parking available as well, which is normal in an urban and municipal setting. So, I see those being there, but I am sensitive to, because it's every municipality that I'm in, and that parking is an issue. And until we give up our cars and trucks, I suppose it always will be.
Councillor Wright Miller.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you very much for the presentation, and I think it warms our heart to see people wanting to build in Belleville, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
And being a Bellevillian, we all know what this site was, and it's been sitting there for an awfully long time, and it would be, it makes sense in that area. This may be a staff question too. The servicing of a site for that many units, I know we don't know what that would look like, but a timeline, do we have any idea or a sense of, so once that would be your first hurdle, what would that be, a year, 2 years? Do you have any suggestions?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, so their initial servicing study, they provided an option to service their site through the city that currently does not have the capacity for their development. So we are working together with them to come up with a feasible and possible solution. And for timeline, to answer your question, right now the most appropriate future way forward would be once the Avonlow sewer pump station is constructed and associated downstream pipe network. That timeline is to be determined. I don't know that offhand. I know it's doing design right now. Maybe Steve might be able to know when the timeline would be on that, but.
So basically the site is part of a larger request for minister's modification that went through council for the larger site, which includes the old fairground site. So the old fairground site, council approved the capital project for the Dunnett extension, which would have sewer and water run to the northern boundary of the old fairground site. So that's one potential option. There might be some temporary solutions for this residential site as well, but the applicant and their agents have had several discussions, and one of the things is, and it was referenced, is that once our minister's modification and the official plan is approved, hopefully with that larger area sort of transitioning to residential, then we'll be able to move forward with sort of a larger servicing strategy. And we do have funds assigned to develop servicing strategies for the larger area. So it's not going to happen tomorrow. I think the applicants are aware of that, but they just want to make sure that their project's moving forward in the right direction, and they also want to sort of set the tone, I guess, for the revitalization of the area as well. So, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Alsop.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and very exciting development here, and certainly hope we get all the servicing and everything that we need in order in rapid succession so we can get that together. I had a couple of people reach out to me today with questions about the application. I think the first question best directed to you, then the next one for staff. So the parkland that's included, so we have two pieces of owned land that are sort of adjoining, both of which are in various stages of planning. It looks like just 0.05 acres of the parkland is in the site that we're discussing today.
Right.
And that the remainder of the parkland is in that other owned site. So how do you see that coming together when we're building out these townhouses and single-family homes? When would that park then be usable if we don't know how that second application will go?
Well, I'm going to suggest to you that we could probably do some work on that too. Either in one ownership, perhaps we could bring forward some additional lands from the industrial component to the residential components. There may be a way to work with staff to figure that out, because I think that's where you're heading on that particular issue. So it's we think about it, we think, well, this is just going to happen. Well, your point is very well taken. How can we make it happen sooner? And so I think we could be flexible on looking at how we could, realign that boundary perhaps, and bring it into the residential portion. I think that'll be easier if we're successful in getting the official plan amended, but nevertheless, it can happen either way. So let's take a look at that, at operationalizing your suggestion.
Good, well thank you, because I certainly didn't want to be in a situation where we get the subdivision done, we have 0.05 of a hectare of parkland, and then we're waiting for the second application to then finish out the park.
Understood.
Yes, thank you. And then to staff, question as it relates to Palmer Road. So fairly wide road, quite a hill on the road. Only one sidewalk on the, I guess would be the west side of Palmer in that area. So if we're adding 153 residential units, possibly with a park as well, are we looking at either putting in a sidewalk on Palmer Road or even active transportation lanes? And would that coincide with the development, I guess is the other portion of that.
Yeah, so in terms of sidewalks, I forget which committee, oh, no, it's not this committee, it was the Transportation Committee. We're doing an update, and one of the things we're going to be looking at is sidewalk connectivity in the city as well, and setting priorities for that. So obviously if this area is going through transition, that's an important part to consider, and that'll all be part of the budget and who's spending the money, or or what council wants to put their money on. So we hopefully that'll be part of the transportation master plan, sort of that larger issue of sidewalks. So whether you can't, you know, you might take cash in lieu initially, but that doesn't build it, sort of thing. Like, you can't have a sidewalk just built in front of it. So we do have to come up with a sidewalk solution that's larger issue for the city. So we're looking forward to bringing that forward too. So.
Great, thank you, because I think it would be necessary in that area. And then as an active transportation link to the bike path that we have currently extending up Bridge Street past the old fairgrounds property, as a connector there, that would be very helpful as well. So we'll push for that.
Yeah, so yeah, and then the engineering, when they do review it, they will go through a more detailed review. Once we get the plans finalized, they'll also look at matters such as connecting into the transportation master plan and active transportation network. So.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions from committee members? I have two. Obviously, there's a lot of background work that still has to occur. But when you get in a position, if everything's approved, you have the underground service capacity, what do you see as a timeline for construction? Because we need more homes faster, right? So.
Yeah, boy, have I heard that. Yeah, I mean, it's immediate. I mean, it's really, you know, I want to say that a lot of work has happened in the last 4 to 6 months at staff and at political level and our level in trying to reposition these properties in this area for development. And our intention would be to move forward as quickly as possible to make that happen. But we can't move faster than the servicing strategy being developed and executed. So there's a lot that can really, a lot of benefit that will come from this development, I think, in terms of cleaning up any contamination that's on the site, in terms of taking these lands, which are really, you know, derelict at this point in time, and I don't want to overstate that, but and then also completing this community, you know, in this area. So I think it's in everybody's interest, and we see it, to move as quickly as possible. And given the opportunity, my understanding is the client intends to proceed immediately with this development.
Okay, and I guess I'll reframe the question is that, so if all things being equal and you have all the approvals and everything and you're ready to put shovel in ground, based on the number of units you're looking at building in terms of single family plus the townhomes, I'm assuming it would be done in phases. What would be the timeline for full build out? If everything was approved today, how long would it take to build?
I'm gonna, boy, I know that Tom Yakovec intended to be here tonight. He's but had a family emergency, so I don't think he's, and he might have a better answer. So I would say it would probably be 2 to 3.5 years, that kind of thing.
Sure.
There's no intent on waiting on this property. As quickly as we can move in the market, as quickly, and this is a development that could happen quickly, you know, in terms of servicing the nature of the development. There's nothing holding it back.
No, and just to be fair, that's a question I ask everybody, because we have seen many times where the municipality has been accused of being the gatekeeper, if you will, but then at the same flip the coin, we see a lot of development that's been approved at the council level in terms of zoning, and the building activity that's out of our control is not following. And I know that's an issue we're going to take up with the province, but I asked that question of everybody. The second question I have is, it's just a follow-up on the parking issue. And you referenced that, you know, typical family home, there'll be one spot in the garage, one in the driveway, and then parking on the street. Now, we have a bylaw that prohibits parking overnight on any curb street 12 months out of the year. And what we're finding is that as we get into a more concentrated build, that suddenly as people move in and have guests over, there's nowhere to park. And so something to consider when we start looking at this concentration. We're very much a car-centric community, and I would say society at large. It's not going away. We're very much rural, and we can always get to A to B through public transit or other means. And so we're finding in other areas of our city that are currently building out where suddenly homeowners are now complaining of the fact that there is not enough parking, particularly for guests on an overnight. And I know that we need as many houses, and housing sells, driveways don't. But perhaps looking at some options for some communal visitor parking or something like that, that would probably solve a lot of headaches down the road for the city if it's looked at the front end. So my concern is that there isn't enough parking for visitors or even residents, and particularly too, we're finding a lot of places where you're having more and more people live in one place, and they do come with cars.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay. No other questions from committee members? Okay, thank you for your presentation.
Good.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? In favor? Yeah, come on forward if you could state your name.
Thank you. I'm Bob Scott. My wife and I own the old schoolhouse. It's adjacent to this property. I have lots of parking, by the way. It's $10 a night.
There you go.
And we'll talk. Yeah, we'll have that discussion off to the side. I'm absolutely floored that this property has not been developed before this. You know, it's been, you go north of 401, man, oh man, they're going like crazy out there. And here we are right in the center of town with all the amenities close by. And it's a field full of cement. And people throwing garbage over the fence. You know, there's garbage bags all the way along there, driving me nuts, frankly. So we're very much in favor of having neighbors. We'd like to see that development happen as quick as possible. I think it's good for the city. I think it's good for the tax element of things. And we need this town to grow.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from committee members? No? Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Yes, if you come forward. And I'd also suggest too, if you put your name and address on the clipboard there on the podium, and then that way it's you're recorded as being here.
My name is William Noble. I live on Bogart Crescent, just across from this proposed development. I think it's a great idea. I've lived there for 6 years, and I see people throwing garbage there and, you know, taking all their leaves off their lawn and throwing it over there instead of going to Wallbridge. I have one concern. Is there a entranceway off of Palmer to this new subdivision? Because you're going to need traffic lights at Palmer and Moira with the increased amount of traffic. So that's all I have to say. I'm very much in favor.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? And I'll ask a third time, is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? And finally, a third time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Seeing none, I have a resolution that the RIC Midland Land Incorporated Application B-77-1188 be referred to the regular Planning Advisory Committee meeting for consideration. Moved by Councillor Alsop, seconded by Councillor Chatton. All in favor? That's carried. And can I get a motion to adjourn this portion of the meeting? Councillor Alsop, Councillor Enright Miller, all in favor? That's carried. Moving on to the Planning Advisory Committee members. Mr. Fenton sends his regrets, and as already noted, Councillor Millette sends his regrets, and Councillor Chatton is sitting as an alternate. Officially, any disclosure of pecuniary interests and general nature thereof? See none. Reading and confirmation of the minutes, resolution of the minutes of the City Council Planning Committee meeting and Planning Advisory Committee meeting held on March 6, 2023 be approved. Councillor Chatton, seconded by Mr. Jennings. All in favor? It's carried. No deputations. Correspondence, we have received a number of correspondence through the clerk's office. Could I get a motion to receive? Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Enright Miller. All in favor? That's carried. Referrals from the public meeting, 6.1, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed amendments to the Belleville official plan and zoning bylaw 10-245, 221 Bell Boulevard, City of Belleville. Owner is Choice Properties Limited Partnership. Agent is Wellings of Belleville Incorporated. File numbers B-77-1185. Resolution is that report number PP-2023 -18 dated April 3rd, 2023 regarding notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed amendments to the Belleville official plan and zoning bylaw number 10-245 as amended, 221 Bell Boulevard, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Ensuring Development Services Department. Moved by Councillor Alsop, seconded by Mr. Baltutis. Any questions or comments? Councillor Alsop.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just had a question to staff related to the idea of a seniors development, so 55 plus. I know that we worked on another zoning application a few months ago to remove people zoning as it related to an age being set on that facility. Just wondering if we have a similar situation here or if it's different in any way.
Okay, I'll get that answer for you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is a situation where initially the application came in as 55 plus. When we responded to them, we said we will be evaluating it as an apartment building because that we are removing people zoning such as that from our zoning bylaws. So we didn't want to carry that forward even under the existing zoning bylaw. So we did speak with them about that. As they're the property owners, you know, as they develop it, they can rent it to who they choose, but we're not going to be evaluating it under any kind of age limits or people restrictions.
Thank you, fair enough. So the issue previously was that our zoning had an age restriction. Yeah. This one is not in the zoning, but the property owner may choose to do with it as they see fit.
Yes, that's correct. They proposed this seniors apartment. We clarified that we would be evaluating it as an apartment building.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Brown.
This question may be better posed to staff. In this particular intersection, it is a very high volume traffic area. We've just actually widened Sydney Street in this particular area to accommodate 2 turning lanes, a straight through lane and a right turn lane. Have we done any traffic impact analysis as it relates to crosswalks, particularly given that this will be the second seniors focused community that's going into that particular set of land?
Yeah, staff.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the applicant is required to complete a full traffic impact study for this proposal. Current one to date will need to be revised to include additional information. We can ask them at that time to look at providing additional consideration for pedestrian crossings. I know right now on Sydney Street we have that multi-use trail going down Sydney Street, and there's been intersection improvements already to that date. To date, I'm trying to recall, I think all 4 crossings right now have pedestrian heads, timing, and everything, but we can have them further assess that in their traffic impact study.
Director Ashton has some additional details.
Oh, and just further, the larger vision for the corridor, which includes Bell and Highway, or North Front Street, I should say, is the corridor study, and they'll be also looking at ways to sort of make it for all modes of transportation, I guess, as we move forward. Although it might not answer the immediate question, but the longer term vision is that we will, you know, have methodologies of making that a friendlier, also pedestrian area as opposed to more focused on the car as it is now.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you. 6.2, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for a proposed amendment to zoning bylaw 10-245, 317 Front Street, City of Belleville. Owner is Ali Omar. Agent is EcoVue Consulting Services Incorporated. File number is B-77-1186. Resolution is that report number PP-2023-19 dated April 3rd, 2023 regarding notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 10-245 as amended, 317 Front Street, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering and Development Services Department. Moved by Councillor Chatton, seconded by Mr. Jennings. Any questions or comments? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to reiterate my concerns as it relates to the number of parking spaces associated with this facility. Anybody who owns a building or resides in downtown will tell you that the limited amount of parking, overnight parking in particular, is a very contentious issue with the building owners. So for us as a planning advisory committee to make an exception that allows and creates even more, exacerbates an issue that already exists, I'm not at all comfortable with. So in this particular case, I would like to know what the alternative would be if we don't make an exception as it relates to the parking.
Okay, staff will note that. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Alsop.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to lend my support to those comments as well as a member of the BDIA board for a number of years. Certainly parking was at the forefront of everyone's mind, and you know, I look at 5 parking spots for proposed 18 units total. That doesn't seem very well planned out to me, and I know that certainly they set expectations at the front end, but as we all know, people will change jobs, and that new job might require a vehicle, and then all of a sudden, people who said, oh, I don't have a vehicle, it's not going to be a problem, may have vehicles, and it may be a significant problem. So I would certainly like to see that addressed moving forward with the proposal.
Okay. Councillor Chatton.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I just have a point of clarity that I'd like to know, because I just simply don't know. In the parking areas that we have downtown that are public parking spots, I realize somebody had said that it was no overnight parking whatsoever. Is there any possibility that the city could work with the land developer, or I guess it wouldn't be land developer, sorry, the owner of this particular property, to make some amendments so that we can build more spaces for people without having parking as an issue? Is there some way that we could address that to meet somebody halfway so that we can address the supply and demand issues with housing in the downtown core?
Yeah, I'm going to let Director McDonald tackle that one.
Okay, thank you.
So through the chair to Councillor Chatton and to all the members. So I figured I was going to have to speak to this at some point tonight. No, it's okay. This has been and as Councillor Brown knows, previously on the board, I have been at the BDIA a number of times discussing parking. So it's been a long-standing issue, and certainly parking is part of corporate services. It generally falls in Deputy Clerk's office, but that's me right now. Corporately, the city supports downtown redevelopment, and for it to be successful, it requires people to live and work downtown. So I don't think there's anybody, certainly that managing parking, that doesn't agree with that and support it. The age-old struggle we've had is the parking model in downtown. It's user pay. You're going to struggle with it in a couple days here at budget when you get to parking and you realize that we are at the tipping point of being tax funded, so it's not paying for itself. So we're going to have that discussion here in a couple days and look at how we can continue to be user funded. So to that point, we've talked on a number of occasions with BDIA, some of the landowners downtown that are redeveloping their properties to have successful residential units downtown. We've asked them on a number of occasions to look at some of those models that are successful in other jurisdictions. The struggle has always been the cost. So right now we have paid parking overnight downtown in a couple of spots. I can tell you, I have challenged our parking coordinator to monitor them, and they're empty at about a 90% rate almost all the time. So the people that are living downtown are not parking in them. And right now they're totally free. There's no charge. So the conversations we're having, your colleague, Councillor Thompson, the current representative to the BDIA, myself and the mayor had a meeting with the president of the board right now, chair, I think, and the executive director of the association, and we're looking at expanding that program, recognizing the increased development of residential units downtown. And in particular, there's a lot of short-term accommodations being developed downtown. So the requirement for overnight stays is growing. A lot of our comparative municipalities, Cornwall, Peterborough, Kingston, Prince Edward County, not as much in Quinte West, who's revamping their parking program. They have passes. They range, overnight passes, they range, you know, in price significantly, but one of our real comparative municipalities charges about $600 a year for a pass for an overnight unit. So we started that conversation, and I think, you know, the current president and executive director are open to it. So we've asked them, we've sent them away to do some work for us, because I think ultimately they've got to be a partner. But I've been down this road before, and there hasn't been a lot of appetite for it. Our parking is not in our market is not cheap, but it barely pays for itself, and that's the issue we have. The comments here tonight about us being a car-centric municipality are absolutely correct, 100% correct. And a lot of cities that are just larger than us, their downtown cores, thrive by being not car-centric. They have robust public transit, and the people that live downtown live, work, play downtown. And that's a lot of times how it thrives, because they're just not car-centric, and they don't rely on having parking spaces for every unit. And that's been our struggle. The struggle for me is recommending to council to have the tax-paying base that may never come and park downtown to fund those spaces and the care and maintenance, resurfacing, cleaning, winter maintenance of a space that is for a for-profit rental unit. That's a tough sell for me to this table in a council meeting.
No, go ahead.
Thank you. If I may, supplementary to that then, is there any possibility of partnering with the actual owners of the proposed new unit developments and selling them the specific parking spots at a cost that will be sustainable, that will bring in revenue for the city?
Through the chair, that's what we're asking the BDIA right now to help us manage, is all of those property owners with their tenants to get that to that piece where it's the owner's responsibility with their tenant. We'll section off very specific places. What we don't want is cars scattered haphazardly through the parking lot. That's difficult for us to manage. It's difficult for them to manage. So very specific areas that we can manage, and we know pass-based, where they're absolutely in the large Riverside lot, for instance, section off a very specific cordon, make it marked, make them pass-based, and then it's easy to manage on both ends. So we're looking for them to partner with us in a very measured, organized fashion. So that's the perfect world. So there will be people who want to participate and have it managed, and there certainly will be people who may just say, we'll manage expectations on the front end and see where that goes.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that robust response. I see this as opportunity. I don't see this as necessarily a negative aspect for this particular developer. I do think that there are ways around this. I don't think it needs to be as hard as it sounds like it's going to be.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, got a motion on the floor. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 6.3, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 3014, southwest corner of Millennium Parkway and Highway 62, City of Belleville. Owners 1499926 Ontario Incorporated and Fry Leasing Incorporated. Agent is Jewel Engineering Incorporated, and the file number is B-77-1187. Resolution is that the report number PP-2023-20 dated April 3rd, 2023 regarding notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended, southwest corner of Millennium Parkway and Highway 62, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering and Development Services Department. Councillor Chatton, seconded by Mr. Jennings. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. 6.4, notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 10-245, 40 Wilson Avenue, City of Belleville. Owner is RIC Midland Land Incorporated. Agent is Innovative Planning Solutions, and the file number is B-77-1188. Resolution is that report number PP-2023-21 dated April 3rd, 2023 regarding notice of complete application and introductory public meeting for proposed amendment to zoning bylaw number 10-245 as amended, 40 Wilson Avenue, City of Belleville, County of Hastings be received as information, and that staff report back at such time as input from the public, commenting agencies, and municipal departments has been received, assessed, and addressed to the satisfaction of the Engineering and Development Services Department. Moved by Councillor Enright Miller, seconded by Mr. Baltutis. Any questions or comments? I would just say to staff, like I said earlier, the application or the applicant spoke to parking and seems to want to rely on street parking as a part of their solution. So perhaps we'd be entertained to see some type of parking solution that's not going to come back and be a legacy issue down the road. Any other questions or comments? If not, all in favor? That's carried. Moving on to reports, 7.1 staff recommendation report for proposed zoning bylaw amendment, bylaw 3014, 4394 Old Highway 2, City of Belleville. Owner is Margaret Ray and Jessica Easterbrook Welsh. Agent is Watson Land Surveyors Incorporated, and the file number is B-77-1183. Resolution is that the Planning Advisory Committee recommends the following to City Council: that zoning bylaw number 3014 as amended be amended by rezoning the subject land from highway commercial C1 zone and rural residential RR zone to highway commercial C1-14 zone with a special provision to permit a reduced interior side yard width of 4.9 meters along the southern lot line. Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Alsop. Any questions or comments? See none, all in favor? That's carried. 7.2, yep. It's a staff recommendation report for proposed zoning bylaw amendments to bylaws number 10-245, 3014, and 2076-80 as amended. The applicant is the City of Belleville, and the file number is B-77-1189, and the acting manager of policy planning, Mr. Deming, will make a presentation to the committee.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to keep this short, seeing as we're at the end of the meeting. But Bill 23 came into effect this year, and that amended the Planning Act, which ultimately meant we had to adapt and to adjust that. So what we did was we looked at our existing policies that we have in play today for second units and coach houses. They were introduced in November of 2018. To allow for a second unit or a coach house in any single detached, semi-detached, or townhouse dwelling. So when Bill 23 came into effect, it seems like the slide is partially cut off, so we're having a lot of technical difficulties today, so I'm glad I printed them off for you guys. So feel free to follow along on there. Bill 23 is something that, like I said, we are obligated to adapt to this. The bill came in, it basically said municipalities are prohibited from prohibiting these kind of restrictions. Other things that we cannot ask for more than one parking space per accessory dwelling unit, and we cannot we can't say how small they can go. We can say how big they can go, but we can't say how small they can go. So this was the parameters we had to work with. So basically what we did was we took our existing policies and we amalgamated them into a single set of policies. We kind of redesigned them under this accessory dwelling unit term. and we've brought forward an amendment today. So what are accessory dwelling units? Just for a quick refresher, you'll hear common terms all the time: basement apartments, in-law suites, secondary suites. There's really a lot of terms that are thrown around. One is commonly duplex. These are not duplexes. These are not triplexes. These are meant to be accessory to the main unit, accessory to the single detached, semi-detached townhouse units. The province was clear in that policy. And what we did, as I mentioned, we took our existing policies. We've carried forward as many of these as we could. We wanted to have minimal impact on existing neighborhoods. And part of this also, we're doing this now because we have to adapt to this quick. We can take a closer look at this as we go through the consolidated zoning process. We've received a number of comments already that have kind of helped us look at how we're going to address these in the long term. But we're fairly comfortable with these policies that we have now. And again, the updated terms, we're looking forward to our new zoning bylaw, but we're also merging our existing policies. So where do these come into play? Primarily the urban area. So the map on the left here shows the entire municipality. The entire municipality is allowed one second unit, one coach house right now. This won't change with these policies. The rural area will still be permitted one accessory dwelling unit. The Bill 23 says we have to allow for two within the urban serviced area. So these will be only in the urban part of Belleville that these will be allowed. So what have we done so far? 2 weeks ago we had 2 public information centers here. It was quite well attended. We had, I'd say 35 to 40 people attend. We received a number of comments. We had a great discussion with the Quinte Landlords Association. They provided some comments specifically about parking, which we will look at addressing in the consolidated zoning bylaw. One of their concern was basically, is requiring one parking space a hindrance to someone looking to develop this? In the report, you'll note that a couple years ago, Council, following the Housing Summit, approved a number of parking reduction policies. So we actually have an avenue already for reducing that parking requirement through a minor variance. And we'll look at implementing those as basically as of right requirements in the consolidated zoning bylaw. So if you meet, if you're within a set distance from a school, commercial area, and a public transit spot, maybe you don't need that parking space. That's what the recommendation from those parking reductions are, and that's what we're looking forward looking to carry forward into these new provisions. So what you have today is a policy recommendation to amend our bylaws for right now. Bill 23 came into effect January 1st. We have developers already looking to inquire, looking to build these in. If we don't address this, the Bill 23 essentially overrides our zoning, so then we don't have control over this. By amending our bylaws, this allows us to put controls on it that are, designed for Belleville. So this is our way of, ensuring that we have some say on this. Of course, we can take further look at this through the consolidated zoning bylaw. So if they, they aren't perfect yet, we can get closer to that as well. So unlike a normal application where we would have a public meeting, this is our public meeting. Fortunately, there isn't anyone. But we did have great attendance at the Public Information Center. We have been receiving lots of correspondence from the public, so that we've been very vocal with them and communicating with lots of people that have inquired on it. But our recommendation is not to send it back to staff like we normally do. We are recommending that you make a recommendation to council so we can get these in there and start facilitating this with Belleville policy. So any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Any questions from community members? Councillor Alsop.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, certainly I'm in favor of moving this forward for all the reasons that you mentioned. It gives us a little bit of control over it, and we would get overridden anyways, so great to get out in front of it. Just wondering, looking for sort of a round number, so if someone is currently in the urban part of Belleville, and they're looking at adding in an accessory dwelling unit outside of their home, do we have a sense of what the cost would be to extend services to that secondary dwelling, provided it's on a standard, urban-sized lot?
Yeah, that's, so just for clarification, you're asking for actually extending the services from the main dwelling to the detached accessory dwelling.
Yeah, in order to
process.
facilitate water, sewer.
Yeah, I don't have an exact number. I'd like to refer to our building staff on that. They process the permits, they see how much that comes in. If you like, I can follow up and I can provide you with an estimate on some recent ones that we've done. Okay. That would be great. Okay.
Can that be sent to everyone?
Yeah, we'll get that.
Yep,
answer.
definitely.
There is a bylaw though for connections that has a standard fee attached to it before it fluctuated, but previous councils have approved, and it's a fixed rate for each hookup. So, but we'll get that information. So on the other hand, Mr. Jennings.
Thank you. I had a question about the designation of the urban area. So does that mean that all lots must be on city services, or are there some that are still on wells and septic systems?
No, that's a great question through you, Mr. Chair. So within the Belleville urban area, which I see here the map did not pop up. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Michelle. Within the urban area, any new development is required to be on municipal services. So anytime we get a new single detached dwelling, it must be connected within that area. In the rural area, again, it's permitted to be on septic. We do have a number of legacy properties that are on well and septic in the urban area. They would not be permitted the secondary accessory dwelling unit. They would be permitted, as of right, the first one. But ideally, and kind of what we deal with on a regular basis, is we would like to see them eventually connected. But, legacy issues exist for a long time usually.
Any other questions from community members? Yep, Ms. Van Dyke.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I apologize if you've already answered this, but during the public inquiries or the public sessions, was there any concerns that were brought forward that you'd be able to highlight with us this evening?
Oh, definitely. Off the top of my head, I would say that we overall had a really great response from people, and the more we discussed with them, I felt like we were able to ease a lot of their concerns. Some of the main concerns from residents were noise and how to, they were asking, what do I do if it's too loud? We had one person discuss noisy neighbors with their stereo. And we do have a noise bylaw that addresses that, and complaints can go to our bylaw enforcement officers. Parking was a bit of a mix. Some people saying, the general discussion that we had tonight was, some people say we need lots of parking, we need more parking. Others is, we need to reduce that. So there was kind of complaints on both sides of that fence. I felt like we were able to address them. I think we hear, again, things on both sides. So one, with our policies, you'll see that we're requiring that the main unit maintain 50% of the floor area, because it's supposed to be the main use, right? And these are accessory uses. So we've seen some people that have raised issues saying, they didn't want their single detached neighborhood to turn into a neighborhood full of triplexes. On the other hand, we've had developers ask about, why are we not permitting more floor area dedicated to it? So we've kind of fielded those and explained that, we are trying to maintain that neighborhood character of the existing area while also allowing for these units. So it's a bit of a balance. I think a lot of the comments we've received on the certain issues have been on both sides, and, we're trying to, drive down that middle lane. So I think I provided some of the comments that we received, and then this morning we had received a bunch over the weekend, so I forwarded those along too.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Any other questions from community members? Councillor Brown.
More so an observation than a question, and Mr. Demings and I have talked about this previously. Our current city bylaw allows up to 5 unrelated individuals to live in any dwelling unit. I have to be careful of my language here. And in an accessory, meaning 2 within the urban area, technically up to 15 people could be living on that one residential property, correct? I did have that correct?
There is some nuances to that, I would say, but technically, yes, you are correct.
So the concern I have in terms of, and I appreciate, this is a provincial legislation that we're trying to figure out how to fit. And perhaps not related directly to planning, but I would like us to take, the city, to take the opportunity to revisit the bylaw as it relates to unrelated individuals. And the reason that I'm requesting that through planning is because as city councilors, we are all very familiar with the boarding house issue that is occurring. Matt's over there smiling, I know he's getting ready. And all of the things, the encumbrances that come with that particular thing. So the excessive parking, people not having any place to put their cars, so they're parking on the lawn, that it's unsafe. We don't necessarily know that these boarding houses exist, so they may not have had fire inspections and those types of things. So through the fact that what this provincial legislation that we must meet is positioning us for, is there an opportunity for us to take it in another fashion as it addresses the number of unrelated individuals that may live in one dwelling unit?
Okay. Mr. Deming?
Yep, sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. So the policy you're referencing is a legacy zoning bylaw provision from the zoning bylaw 1245, which is the Belleville urban area. So that's where that specifically pertains to. As part of our terms of reference with Dillon Consulting, who's working on our consolidated zoning bylaw, we did include provisions to remove people zoning for that. That is a commonly, for example, that definition family will be removed from the zoning bylaw. It is a form of people zoning, and that does come from the Ontario Human Rights Commission that we should be removing that term. The nuances that I mentioned in the the accessory dwelling units, are provisions such as limiting the space, number of bedrooms, which the Ontario Building Code, typically it's 2 people per bedroom, so the limit of 2 bedrooms also provides some level of control there. It's something that, perhaps we need to look closer at on how to regulate, but I think we do have to be careful with how we regulate it. Perhaps zoning is not the right way, because again, we are trying to avoid people zoning in that sense. And as you mentioned, this is a provincially mandated update, so we don't really have the choice of allowing for the 3 units in this situation. And then again, like I said, the Ontario Human Rights Commission says we shouldn't be people zoning. So it's a difficult balance that I would say that it's going to warrant a lot of further consideration. I don't have a specific solution for it tonight, but I don't believe that type of regulation would be fitting in a zoning bylaw. Okay.
Yeah. If you want to activate your microphone there, yeah, no problem.
Apologies, I think I turned it off. So if I could further, then with the existing city bylaw, I appreciate that from a zoning perspective, that we can't regulate, we can't people zone. In this circumstance, though, I feel like there's another city bylaw that I believe needs to be addressed that isn't related to zoning per se, but more so in terms of housing and the number of unrelated people that can live within a dwelling unit in the urban, and I think it's specific to that. So I guess I would pose the question more so to City Clerk about whether or not there's an opportunity, or the Director of Engineering.
So I think some of the regulations in zoning that don't deal with people, but I always say it doesn't matter if there's 1 or 100 people in a house. If you don't know there's 1 or 1, because one person could also have 50 cars parked all over the driveway and on his front lawn and everything else. So I think it's in our provisions. We do have requirements for minimum landscaped open space in the front yard. So that's part of what we try to do to maintain character. We've been working through bylaw to try to come up with a solution, because for property standards right now, we have to give them a warning for 28 days or whatever it is to move their car, and then by that time they've moved their car, and then next month they'll move it back on again, sort of thing. So that's that's going to be an ongoing issue. By the way, discussions with our org review and bundling bylaw, licensing and parking all together will be brilliant to address this solution to this. I'm just putting a plug in for the future, but I think it is going to be something that we're not just faced with, but other places are faced with. But I think council will also have to do a large investment in licensing if that's what they feel that this is a priority, to make sure that is there a way to regulate unrelated people? So that'll be a decision. Well, I'm not sure if it's possible, but it's more of speaks to licensing rather than zoning at this point in time. And Matt might disagree with me because he's oversees licensing, but
I think the Director of Corporate Services regrets answering the question when it was first posed. I saw some offloading occurring over here. In all fairness, Director McDonald, do you have anything you want to comment there in terms of licensing or regulation when it comes to that?
Yeah, I think through the chair to Councillor Brown, certainly there has got to be a way to regulate the issue that you're looking to address, and so I think we can look at what other communities are doing. It's not a Belleville unique issue. I know I've spoken to my colleague in Kingston, and I'm sure if anybody looked at St. Patrick's Day pictures from Kingston in the news, they had issues in the student section surrounding Queens, and the cost to the community is significant every year. A couple of weekends in particular at Queens, with unrelated folks living in a certain neighborhood, widespread. So I speak with my colleague there regularly, and they struggle with it. But there are ways to regulate it, and I think to the folks in planning, the Human Rights Tribunal has spoken pretty loudly and clearly about the limits of zoning people. But there has got to be a way to address it, and there are communities that are doing their best, and so we'll look for some avenues to do what we have to ensure that other people in our community can quietly and peacefully enjoy property as well, because that's what they're seeking, and so we'll do our best. There's a couple of things we can look at.
Okay. Councillor Alsop.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and just one more, hopefully a quick one from me. So as it relates to the conversation about these accessory dwelling units, is there any provisions in terms of what sort of foundation they have to have, if they can be in some way portable in nature? I'm envisioning a situation where, and it looks like the connection charge is about 11,000 total, 5,000 for water, 6,200 for wastewater. So someone gets the connections put in place, brings in a prefab tiny home that is in matching the character of the neighborhood to some degree, plunks it down, accessory dwelling unit?
The Ontario Building Code would, through you, Mr. Chair, the Ontario Building Code would really come into play for that. Whether it's the tiny home or if it's on wheels, there are different regulations through the building code that regulate that. If they determine that it's a structure, that's when the zoning would come into play for that. So again, I think that's one that I'd like to follow up with our building officials on, because they'd have a more clear answer from the building code perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Through the chair, I just wanted to add to the point. On a residential lot, you're only allowed at one pair of connections. So the new coach house, for example, wouldn't be permitted to have a second connection line. It would just be extended from wherever it's from the main building. And there is one specific exception in the Ontario Building Code that Tom was mentioning, and it's called a prefabricated dwelling, where it has to be on a foundation and built with a building permit.
Any other questions or no? Okay. Any questions or comments from other committee members? No? Oh, yeah. Ms. Van Dyke?
Sorry, does there need to be a firewall in between? So let's say, like, any one of these examples, does there need to be one? Sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, for like an accessory dwelling unit that's attached to a house or within a house, yes, there are fire code separations between them. Any new accessory dwelling unit, even old ones, for it to be added to our registry, we ask them to apply for a building permit application, and at that point it's reviewed. So before they get signed off and before they get added to our registry, we are sure that they're fire safe.
Okay, and sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Are these codes, have they had any recent changes, or are these the same that have always been? Or have there been revisions in the last 5 years?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, that's actually a great question. With Bill 23 affecting the Planning Act, the one thing the province did not do is update the Ontario Building Code. So the same provisions do apply. Where it gets tricky with that is if you're adding a third unit into a residential dwelling. The Ontario Building Code does not recognize that as a second unit. You're now into a small buildings permit, which is very similar to a small apartment building. So again, for the very specifics of the building code, I would refer to my building official colleagues, but there is, there's much more hurdles through the Ontario Building Code when it comes to that third unit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Chatton.
Just a point of clarity. Is it appropriate at this time to put a motion on the floor to move that the recommendation go to regular council? Because if it is, I'd like to do that.
Yeah, it's the next thing.
Okay.
Mr. Deming had to do the presentation, and then once committee members were done asking questions, then I was technically to open it up as a public meeting, but as everyone can see, the gallery is empty, which I won't do. So then my next thing would be to introduce that resolution. Yes. Yeah, so there's no other questions, and there's no members of the public. I'm about to entertain that. The resolution is the Planning Advisory Committee recommends the following to City Council. That application B-77-1189 to amend the City of Belleville zoning bylaws number 10-245, 3014, and 2076-80 as amended be approved as follows. That zoning bylaws number 10-245, 3014, and 2076-80 as amended be amended to replace the definitions of second unit and coach house with a new definition for accessory dwelling unit, and replace the general provisions for the second units and coach houses with new general provisions for accessory dwelling units. Moved by Councillor Chatton, seconded by Councillor Alsop. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried. And my screens are jumping. Information matters. The resolution is the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment monitoring report to April 3rd, 2023 be received. Moved by Mr. Baltutis, seconded by Councillor Enright Miller. Any questions or comments? See none, all in favor? That's carried. Any items under general business? I do have one. Staff, I'd like to see if we could get, we have a monitoring report for applications, which is good to track, but I'd like to see us, and I'm not expecting this tomorrow because it's going to require a little bit of data harvesting, a staff monitoring report on approved zoning for residential development over the past 5 years, and the total build out to date, and the status towards build out. We've asked this question a number of times from developers. We've had some that this committee has seen even last term where we've approved residential zoning and those properties have sat. I know I'm kind of banging the drum here yet again, but I will continue to do so. I'd like us to be able to monitor that so we can see what's actually occurring in terms of development. You know, I can cite one last year of 750 homes that was approved for zoning, and nothing's been done yet, and we're looking at a buildup of about 10 years, which is phenomenal. And as I've said many a times, the province and even I've heard parties in the federal government or in the federal scene suggest that we're gatekeepers, and we need to have the statistics to prove that we're actually here looking at all these applications, moving them through the planning process within the appropriate time frames, and staff do an excellent job to move those along. And so we've done our part, and now we need to start monitoring the actual building that occurs. And the more resource and building that occurs, the cheaper it becomes. And I think right now there's a little bit of a scarcity tactic going on because of flux in the market, and unfortunately the private sector is controlling that. And as a result, we have many people who can't afford a home, don't have access to a home, and then that trickles down into homelessness, which we'll be addressing here very shortly. So I'll just leave that with staff as a general item. Anything else? If not, I'll move for adjournment. Mr. Baltutis, Mr. Jennings, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.